Hey everyone, so I'll answer a question here that was recently asked, which is, why do I have so little diversification? And what's the logic behind that? As I've mentioned before, I am 96% Bitcoin, 4% stocks, bonds, US dollar cash. And then the only things that are not counted in that, that does include my 100% of my 401k from Baumgar Corporation, which I earned over the course of 11 years, maxing out the matching every year and everything that is included in that number. So that 401k is 100% Bitcoin in Fidelity BTC, SBTC, the Bitcoin ETF. So 100% of my 401k is in Bitcoin, and in total, including the 401k, that total balance is 96% Bitcoin. And then the only things that are not counted in that is a little bit of gold, like physical yellow metal gold back that I bought years and years ago. That is too much of a pain to convert, because I'd have to drive to Texas and take a big haircut, and it's just a mess. And then some financial resources that Rachel manages herself, because my risk tolerance is so incredibly high, that she manages some resources that is effectively serves as the emergency reserve fund, just to make sure that our kids will still have a chance to go to college, even if my, incredibly high risk tolerance does not end up serving us well, even though clearly I think it will. Okay, so why do I have 96% in Bitcoin? The answer is because I do not like the investment profile of virtually any other asset right now. Now, if we were sitting in 2009 and the world was melting down and everything was on sale and stocks and bonds were cheap and everything just felt like you could basically, it was shooting fish in a barrel. You could buy anything, and, you could buy Apple for cheap, Amazon for cheap, Coca-Cola for cheap, all that sort of stuff. I would say, okay, there's at least a plausible argument where stocks would make sense, but I don't believe that is the world we live in. If you look at the stock market, the S&P 500, 7 companies out of 500 are basically carrying the entire gains for the S&P 500. And if you want to try to play the stock market, you better either be really good at guessing 7 out of 500, which basically your chances of that are, barely above 1%, or and those, stocks also all have insane valuations already. So it's not like you can just pick the winners because you're picking the most expensive stocks, or you can do a diversified portfolio of the S&P 500, but the S&P 500 is just bumping all-time highs. It's just, compared to earnings and revenue, it's incredibly expensive. Real estate, on the other hand, has all of the problems with, the best way to make money in real estate is with a bunch of leverage, basically super cheap debt that you buy real estate with. Well, debt is not super cheap right now. Debt is extremely expensive, with the federal funds rate at 5.25%. Which means if you're borrowing money, you're probably borrowing it at 8% or 9% or just not cheap. So the reason I'm 96% Bitcoin is I just don't like any of my other options right now. So I don't like real estate. It's got maintenance costs. You have to pay property taxes. It's got extremely high cost of capital right now, meaning the interest rates you have to pay to get money unless you pay cash. And if you pay cash, generally, buying stuff with cash in real estate is not how you get a good return. Typically, the way you get a good return is by borrowing a ton of money, and I don't really like borrowing money anyway. So I don't like real estate. I think gold is going to be demonetized by Bitcoin, meaning I don't want to put my money in gold because I think it's going to eventually start trending down as Bitcoin replaces it as the new monetary base for central banks and things like that. So gold is out. Silver has never made any sense as an investment. I have no idea why people are investing in silver. Silver's been demonetized a long time ago. I think silver makes just no sense other than its industrial use. And, why would you, if you're investing in silver, why wouldn't you invest in bronze and tin and copper? And it just makes no sense. I'm not a commodities investor. So I don't like real estate. I don't like gold. I don't like silver. I don't like stocks right now, because it feels like they're all, the valuations are just insane. I don't like bonds. I've never really liked bonds, just as an investment vehicle. I don't like having debt myself, and investing in other people's debt has never seemed like a good idea to me either. So, not a fan of bonds. Certainly sitting in any sort of currency that someone else can print more of, that makes no sense. And so, the challenge you come to with regard to, a portfolio is, the problem is, okay, if you're going to diversify into what? You have to diversify into something. Now, the safest thing generally is like the S&P 500, which is the Standard & Poor's 500, which is the 500 largest publicly traded stocks in the United States. So, the easy thing is just an S&P 500 index fund like SPY. I think SPY is the biggest one, although I think Vanguard has a really large one as well. But again, the S&P 500 strikes me as very, very, very not on sale right now. In fact, I think people who are buying the S&P 500 right now are going to end up having, as soon as we get a recession, they're going to end up waiting somewhere between 5 years and 7 years for their investment in the S&P 500 just to get back to the price it is today. So I'm like, well, why on earth would I do that? Why, would I ever invest in stocks when I think it's going to take 5 to 7 years to get back to where they are today in a major recession? So I don't like stocks, don't like bonds, don't like real estate, don't like gold, don't like silver. Emerging markets have the same problems with stocks and bonds of they're not cheap either. And so anyway, you end up very quickly in a position where it's like, wait, well, what else would I invest in? In fact, a better question than why am I 96% Bitcoin is why am I even 4% everything else? Because the other 4% is in a mixed basket of, 60-40 stocks bonds, or maybe a 70-30 stocks bonds, or whatever it is. But it's whatever any random financial advisor would tell you to buy. And then, of course, they take 1% of your money every year in order to babysit your money for you, which is, whether you're losing money or gaining money, they get their 1% no matter what, which that whole deal is, ultimately strikes me as a scam of epic proportions, just like higher education. Most of higher education strikes me as a scam of epic proportions right now. So anyway, you add it all up and I'm like, why am I 96% of liquid assets in Bitcoin? Well, the only thing I don't have in Bitcoin is I've, invested substantially in Prospera on the island of Roatan. But again, that's a private investment, and the laws of the United States require you to have a net worth above $1 million, excluding your house. So for private investments, you are not allowed to invest in private companies unless your net worth is more than $1 million. That means your assets exceed your liabilities by more than $1 million. And you are not allowed to count the equity in your house toward that $1 million. And that is the laws of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. So I have invested substantially in Prospera on the island of Roatan. But the reason I don't talk about that on Facebook is, again, the bar is you have to be a millionaire to invest in any private company in the United States. There's a few caveats where non-millionaires can invest in private companies, but it's typically very difficult with lots of restrictions, and the laws are so unfavorable that very few companies do the type of offerings that would allow non-accredited investors. So accredited means you have more than a $1 million net worth. A non-accredited means you have less than a $1 million net worth. And in both cases, that's that you are not allowed to count your house, your primary residence where you live, toward your net worth in that calculation. So anyway, so if somebody said, well, what's the best investment in the world right now? I would say, well, there's two. Prospera on the island of Roatan, where I am president reporting to the CEO. The CEO is Eric Bremen. He's the founder, CEO, and chairman. I think that's a fantastic investment, but again, you have to be a millionaire to even be legally allowed to, under SEC rules, invest in that. And so I don't spend time talking about that on Facebook because, again, I know, a relatively small number of people listening are millionaires, and therefore they don't even qualify to invest in Prospera. So, the vast majority of my net worth is Prospera stock, and the remainder is 96% Bitcoin. And again, so it's like, well, if somebody said, well, you gotta rebalance your portfolio one way or the other, I would say, well, the only two assets I like right now are Prospera stock and Bitcoin. Those are the only two assets I like right now. So, and there's other private companies that I'm a fan of as well, but Prospera is certainly the most prominent right now, and the most promising and the most probability of reaching multi-billion-dollar valuations, or deca-billion-dollar valuations, or centabillion-dollar valuations, or I don't know, maybe Prospera will be a trillion-dollar company one day. I don't know. But again, the short take is there's just not a lot right now that I think makes sense to invest in. Again, for me personally, it comes down to Prospera and Bitcoin. And again, because Prospera is not an option for most of the people watching this, that leaves Bitcoin, which is available to everyone to invest in. So again, why do I even own 4% that's not Bitcoin? The answer is because I don't want to, in an emergency, have a major expense come up, and for some reason Bitcoin is going through some, ridiculous downturn that makes no sense, and I'm stuck liquidating a bunch of Bitcoin at a price that's, abysmally low. I just want to avoid that. So I consider that 4% to be the little bit of breathing room that keeps me from getting forced out of Bitcoin at a low price if the price of Bitcoin becomes low at the same time as I have some major new expense that I've got to cover, that I need to get liquidity somewhere. So that 4% gives me just a little bit of liquidity, a little bit of breathing room if I need to make some major expense, and I want to do that without having to liquidate any Bitcoin because I don't like the price that Bitcoin is being liquidated at. Now, right now, if somebody said, well, Bitcoin will never drop below 50,000 a coin, well, then I would go ahead and put the other 4% in because, I'm completely comfortable with that paradigm. But, I don't know. I mean, Bitcoin can do, crazy things in the very near term in a matter of hours or days. Again, long term, weeks, months, it doesn't matter. But having 4% non-Bitcoin gives me just a little bit of breathing room to make sure I'm never going to have to liquidate a bunch of Bitcoin for a price that I don't feel good about. So anyway, so that's my thinking. I am not diversified, and I've given that a lot of thought. And the vast majority of high net worth people I know are not diversified. Diversification is not the path to getting rich. Almost everybody I know who got to be wealthy, and of which I know a lot of very wealthy people just that I've met in the course of things. Those people almost always got there by making a very high conviction bet on something big, typically a company they built or some investment that they had control of or direct involvement in or had a unique perspective or understanding. And that's how they got high net worth. And, they didn't get there with a diversified portfolio. So anyway, bottom line, why am I so not diversified? The answer is because I don't like my other investment options. And as far as publicly traded stuff that anybody can invest in, the only thing in the publicly traded realm that average people can buy is Bitcoin. That is the number one thing I feel good about and that I have a deep conviction about. And I just don't have a deep conviction, and I just don't feel good about all the other options, which is why I'm not advocating for them on Facebook. As always, this is not financial advice. I am not a licensed finance, tax, or securities or anything else consultant. These are just my own personal opinions based on what I do, based on how I'm feeling about the world and how I think things are likely to play out. And hope it's helpful to you, but that's my thought process and where I am. Have a great night. Thanks.